Hi there, I'm Christine Conrad, and you are listening to another Innovative Tac-Tips with myself and the wonderful Ken Thompson. Fun fact, he and I were former colleagues at a digital engagement agency. But Ken, thank you for coming on, and I would love for you to tell everyone what you do and what about the industry that you're in makes your heart sing about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christine. Good to reconnect with you. I'm VP of Engineering at Calabrio. I lead a global team of software engineers. We build workforce optimization solutions for contact centers. I think what I find most interesting about the space is really if you've ever had to use any services support channel, you're aware of the many opportunities there are for improvement, whether it's how you got to the support individual or service, the problem that you had to begin with, and how it maybe should have been something the company was well aware of. And as a problem solver, I think that's it just creates endless opportunities. You might say job security, but endless puzzles to put together and things to rack your brain around. It's often a space for bleeding uh, adoption of bleeding tech solutions, and so that's really interesting. It's just always a lot of fun and a lot of change.
I appreciate that. I like to call myself like uh not a like purpose secret shopper per se, but a lot of the times I break things, right? And I have to call the the product, like I'll use a vacuum, for example. I'll break something on a vacuum that's pretty expensive and I'll call 1-800 number, and sometimes I'm the problem. I don't have much patience, and just like getting to a human is the end goal. So I appreciate when you say that you like challenges, because I think there's a lot of improvement, especially in every industry, some more than others. But I appreciate that because I do think, virtual agents are nice. Like AI does some really cool things, but I do think at the end of the day, you want to talk to someone to resolve the issue. But again, I digress. Um, so about that, so how did you get into what you're doing now? Like I guess, what led you to where you are today? Or why are you?
I would say it really goes back as far as the contact center industry. It goes back to when we worked together. That was a pretty significant line of business, and so that was my first introduction to being on the service side of that versus as a customer.
Yeah.
And having experience with the challenges of operating a contact center, really, in addition to my experience building software, contributing to software solutions, those really just came together when I joined Calabrio.
I was thinking about this. You were part of that, like, I guess, tiger team per se, but when we had helped a client with their contact center, basically save them money from, I guess it was like maybe two like user experiences to one. Am I far off? I think you were helping
Yeah,
with resolving that, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a fun project.
I mean, again, I think people don't realize like time is money, right? I know that sounds a little cliche, but
Right.
when you create a user experience that saves, I don't want to say like millions of dollars for a company, but like a significant amount, I think that that's huge when it comes to, I guess, like achieving your challenge. So that's really cool. I guess with that, is there any like part of that story, right? I don't know if I answered the question for you or not, but what has been the most memorable moment of your career so far?
The most memorable moment of my career. It's a tough one. I think my career spans so many different types of moments,
Mm.
and so there are war stories I can share as an engineer, having an on-call incident while I'm in a car, and needing to pull over and use my phone as a terminal to log into a server and block hackers that were overseas. That's a war story. There's other stories of earlier in my career doing more entrepreneurship and startups. Getting funding, or winning at a startup competition. There's a couple stories like that, all the way to um, smaller wins where we just make a customer happy. Maybe they're experiencing an issue with the product or not aware of a certain use case of a product that we build. Um, and those are always, it's more for those, the feeling that you remember and recreating that over and over versus the specific incident itself. But it's hard to really just say it's one specific issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess with that, has there okay, so I think failure is like giving up, right? Throwing the towel. Is there an apparent failure of yours that you have had that has later set you up for success that might have been kind of a memorable moment, I guess, when you think about that? Because that feeling when you have to like things are hitting the fan, you're like, what do I do? I have to figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah, similar. Yeah, my where I am today is a result of the many failures and lessons that I've learned from them. One that stands out is a little more cross-functional. I had built a software solution. It was in the early stages of HTML5, and when folks were switching from that to from Flash, and I had built a essentially a product customization software that didn't require Flash, and there wasn't a lot of that back then. And I was naive to believe if I build some cool software, the business will come, and it doesn't quite work like that. And so, I obviously did some work to share the solution that I built with with certain folks that I thought it, would apply to, and there was some interest, but I think it was through that journey that I learned that there's a different skill set and value proposition around sales. And at that time, I was more biased towards building things and just being that hacker engineer that can build really cool things. And I don't need anyone else. It was really my perception at the time. And I learned that there's value to marketing. There's value to storytelling around these solutions. That's as often as some folks may wince at the buzzwords we may apply to technology, it's massively important as part of the story and helping with the adoption and the use cases. And so it's a failure in the sense that I know I had something that was really valuable, but I didn't have the wisdom and the language to communicate that at the time. So
I appreciate that. I will say that I'm passionate about a lot of things, and one of it is like whenever there's a product launch or there's new functionality with a platform, right? I think for me it's like you have to do 3 times as much like basically megaphone promoting go to market than I think people realize.
right.
I appreciate you saying that because sometimes when you're on different sides of the organization, I think that there's some silos in that, right? Like
Mhm.
there's some different opinions, and it's nice when different siloed organizations can come together and there's a commonality and you hit the ground running. So, and again, we've worked together, so appreciate that.
Yeah,
With that, what is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made? It could be time, it could be money, it could be anything, really.
sure. Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I had more entrepreneurial endeavors in my early career.
Mhm,
And, for me, that was taking a bet on myself in that way
mhm,
was a really valuable investment, not just to have to make the attempt at building a sustainable business, but the cross functional perspective it gave me. So I mentioned that story around, valuing sales and marketing. It was through my experience in being an entrepreneur that I was able to develop that lesson.
mhm.
Um, there's the more traditional, for me as a technologist, trained as a software engineer,
Yeah,
the common path there is to, start as an entry level software engineer, you become a mid level senior, maybe a manager at some point.
yeah,
And I didn't take that path. I went straight to trying to build a business, or maybe not straight there, but certainly in my early career, I took a pivot to try and do that. And what that meant was developing an appreciation for sales, developing an appreciation for the cost of running a business, not just writing code. And so I'm able to show up with broader perspectives in various conversations, both within my work life as well as in my personal life, and how I interact with others across different career trajectories. Like that's I couldn't imagine where I would be without taking that time to try that stuff. So
Yeah, I admire that because I think a lot of times people are so scared, right? They'll be like, "Oh, I'll get to that," right? And I think it's admirable for you to just jump in and try it. I mean, obviously, like you pivoted a bit, but I think to your point, there's not one trajectory, like one path, right, to where
right,
you are today. I do think like for me as a sales and marketing and customer success, I guess all hats, right? All those hats in the company. I do appreciate product and engineers, R&D, all that because their mind is so focused, right? And I think for me, I am a global thinker, so I think when you can have someone who started a business who has to think forecasting and all of all of the things that you don't like the bottom line, all the things that you don't think about, right? At the end of the day, to actually make a profit, I
right,
think it's great that you can actually have that, I guess, lens when it comes to being where you are today and actually having conversations with like clients and partners and etc. Right? Because you have that wisdom, which is awesome when it comes to giving them recommendations and helping them solve their business objectives. So that's I think that's a unicorn trait, right? Like I think a lot of people they have to take at least like I want this is dramatic, but like 30 years, right, to figure that out. But I think
yeah.
when you start a business, it's like it's condensed and yeah, I appreciate that. So I guess my question on top of that is being in the industry that you are, expertise, what bad recommendations do you hear? Or growth opportunities, if we want to like position it in that way.
Put a positive spin on it. Um, I think the messages that I wince at the most today are primarily around AI and diminishing its impact. And so the most extreme messaging you'll hear is, game changing, disrupting jobs, disrupting industries, and then which I lean more towards. There's an extreme there that's a bit unhealthy, but then there's the counterpoint of messages, posts, what have you, trying to demonstrate the weaknesses or emphasize the weaknesses. So look how I made Chat GPT give this incorrect answer, or focusing on the flaws of of some of the image or video Gen AI solutions,
Mhm.
instead of recognizing the 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 progress and the pace of progress in those. And so my counter message to all of that is pay attention, um, and adopt and learn these new tools and skill sets. I think a common analogy out there is calculator. And so there was a time when the calculator was a game changing
I mean, I
technology,
can use it
but
in tests, and now I can use it all the time. Like, you know what I mean?
right, yeah, uh, but it didn't eliminate mathematicians. um, it accelerated our ability to perform tasks, create value, and moved our minds towards different things, right? And so
Mhm.
I think of AI in the same way, but I don't minimize it to say it's only that. It is very different than a calculator, and it will disrupt far more things than a calculator ever did. Um, but it's and there are flaws. There are there's lots of room for improvement, but that's not to say it's not something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I have a similar view on that. I like kind of I don't know if I poke fun, but I make light of some of it because it's like a lot of being a marketing comm major, a lot of people use like fear tactics, right? I think for me,
Mhm.
the more that you understand the use of it and how it works, I think the more successful you'll be in like like you said, calculators didn't, it disrupted it, but it was a tool where we could use to make things more efficient. And I think that's the same thing with PCs, personal computers, right? I think there's going to be more jobs on that. And then at the same time, I kind of made a joke because when ChatGPT, like, I'll use that for example, right? Um, they're like, someone passed the bar exam, and I said, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be a good lawyer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like people cheat all the time, and yes, like it's unfortunate that that they use it, and I mean, I'm impressed, but at the end of the day, it's like practicing law is different than passing a bar exam. So I just think like people have to realize like, yeah, shame on that person for doing that, but also at the same time, it's like that doesn't mean that they're going to be this successful lawyer someday. So I just thought that that was an interesting kind of storyline of kind of what's out there when it comes to like drawing attention to maybe not misinformation, but just like brings it down a path where it's like maybe you should look at it like high level and at first and then figure out how it impacts like myself or yourself and then whatever industry you work in. So kind of look at it like that. So what book, I'm a bookworm and there's so many books out there. What book has influenced your life greatly? And are there books that you have given the most or a particular book as a gift?
I can't recall giving a book as a gift. I need to maybe reconsider some of my gift giving. I definitely make recommendations.
Yeah.
Uh, Two that come to mind are uh, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Hmm.
Um, for me, really eye-opening about a lot of cognitive biases that play a role in our daily lives, and so it's really interesting. It's really dense, but also very applicable to you can almost any scenario you can come across, whether it's decision making on how you buy a car, processes you may evaluate at work. So that's one I almost always recommend. And then another one that I think I don't know if I've ever heard anyone else mention is Metaphors We Live By. It was a book that was a part of a curriculum for me in undergrad during a design seminar.
Huh.
But for me, it unlocked a pattern of thought
Mhm.
around abstractions and just recognizing how many things are derived from some common metaphor. And it, for me, after that book, and I think, the discussion, the course, I found myself more able to translate things I didn't know into something I did by finding a metaphor that connected the two after exposure to how often that's the case.
Yeah.
So that's the two I recommend checking out.
Yeah, and that's great. I think a lot of the time when people are explaining things, especially in tech, like we use a ton of acronyms, a ton. And I think the more that you can connect it to a story or metaphor, analogy, idiom, all that, I think it helps paint a picture for the other person that it
Mhm.
clicks. And we learn best humans as like narratives. And so I think metaphors are a really great way of expressing code.
Mhm.
I think that's a really good use case for me because I don't jump to that right away, right? And so I think that's awesome that those are two books that people who are listening who haven't heard of them could read them. Um, and myself, I don't think I've read them, so I should check them out.
For
Um, if you if we went to your office and you were listening, like I shouldn't, I almost gave away the question, but what would be a song you play on repeat, or like what do you listen to when you're like in the zone?
in the zone, it would certainly be something without lyrics.
Mhm.
um, Particularly if I'm listening to songs I really like, I'll listen. It'll take my attention away from what I'm doing to to listen to the lyrics. So it'll be at one point I was an aspiring saxophonist, and so it's probably some light jazz.
Oh, cool.
Something I can play
Really
that
cool.
I can enjoy, listen to, but I
Yeah.
can stay focused on what I'm doing.
I thought you were gonna say Mozart. Mozart at first. I had to think about that. I was like, I haven't talked about classical music in a really long time, and I was like, is that? Is that like, yeah. I was like, they're gonna go there, but jazz. Yeah, that I always think is interesting when like you're in the zone or working and stuff. It's like I'm curious to know what they're actually listening to because sometimes it could be it could be classical, it could be jazz, it could be Cardi B. We don't, you know what I mean? We don't know. And so, or a podcast, I don't know. So I'm always intrigued by what people like listen to when they're working. So I guess maybe my second to last question. If you could have a billboard that reaches billions of people, what would you put on it? Um, yeah, what would you put on it?
Um, Mentioned earlier, marketing's not a skill set of mine, but if I were to start that conversation to speak with other experts and say, here's something to start from and create a better message around it, would likely say something to the effect of pay attention to our environment and AI, and maybe how they intersect.
Yeah.
So between the increasingly visible effects of global warming, um, our power consumption, and likely increasing power consumption as a result of AI,
Mhm.
uh, and we spoke earlier about the impacts of AI on our lives. Those are
Mhm.
all there's a thread there
Yeah.
that that I think is worth paying attention to.
Oh yeah, pay attention. Pay attention. Yeah, that's good. I think yeah, the more that you can I feel like I'll use an analogy of like the state fair, right? The state fair in Minnesota, there's all walks of life, right? There's all walks of life. You have to pay like but just like I guess this is like maybe a extreme example, but just like making sure you don't run into people, right? Like making sure you pay attention to what's around you, who's around you, and then what kind like I think be curious, right? So pay attention, I think a lot of the times I guess I'm adding value to your billboard is like it is important to know what kind to be curious, to be interested
Mhm.
in what people are using from a technology perspective because at the end of the day it could help solve a lot of issues but then also it could blow things up. Not literally, but you know what I mean? Like it could, it could do harm and good but I think as long as you can be grounded with obviously what you think, right? And then apply it to that, I think that that's super important. So
Yeah, for
last
sure.
question.
Mhm.
Sorry, you were gonna ask something. I always
No, go ahead.
okay. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? Um, that's my last question of the day of this
Yeah,
podcast.
I don't have a large social media presence. It's not where I choose to spend my time. I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me, Ken Thompson. Maybe add Calabrio in there, and you'll find me. Um, Otherwise, where I spend a lot of time thinking about how I can best serve customers of Calabrio, and so if you're interested in that work or understanding more about that product, check out calabrio.com. That's where you can learn a little more about what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ken, and I will hopefully see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.